Chen, another 1,000 Pine points for you. According to my records, you're getting close to 10,000. Only 990,000 to go. Hi, Shell. Hi, Joy. What do Pine... I saw a question here. Where'd it go? How do PineCreek fans call themselves? Pinesters, not Duggars. I want to thank David Ariola. That sounds like something... Never mind. I think it's a subscriber. He sent me this video of Justin Brierley. I thought the title was really interesting. This is new. This is August 22nd, 2019, a week ago. And Justin Brierley, the title of his video was "Why After 10 Years of Talking with Atheists, I'm Still a Christian." And I thought that would be a good title for me. Why after 10 years of talking with Christians, I'm still an atheist. But you know what's interesting is he says, after 10 years of talking with atheists, I'm still a Christian. Why are you talking with so many atheists, Justin Brierley? What's your problem? What is the percentage of atheism in the world? Isn't it like something close to 2-3%? Isn't that right? Am I wrong? That atheism on the planet, on the globe, is like low single digits? Why are you even talking to atheists? Why do you even care? You should be talking to Jews. You should be talking to Muslims. You should be talking to Hindus. Because those are well, maybe not Judaism, but Hinduism and Islam, they're the number 2 and number 3 on the list of biggest religions in the planet. Why doesn't your title say, after 10 years of talking with Hindus, I'm still a Christian? Or after 10 years of talking to Muslims, I'm still a Christian? Why the fascination with atheists when there's such a small percentage of the planet? And I don't get it. Well, I do get it. But anyhow, I'm not going to play the whole video, but I'm going to start it at what I think is the beginning, where he gets into the meat of it. I'm going to try playing it at 1.5x. Yes, he is, Shell. He is trying to sell a book of the same name. I wonder if he feels dirty about that. Maybe, I don't know how much money he makes from that podcast, but maybe my guess is it's not a whole lot. And so I guess he has to make money somehow.
Are being taken seriously. And if there's one verse that really embodies the ethos of the show, it would be this one, 1 Peter 3:15. It says there, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect.
And for a lot of people, former Christians, that's the reason why they're no longer a Christian, is because they took 1 Peter 3:15 seriously. You'll hear guys like Matt Dillahunty say that. I believe that. I say many times that people who take apologetics seriously, a lot of them end up leaving Christianity. There's even some Christians out there who will admit that. I wish I would have screen captured those posts on Facebook. Probably if I had time, I could go find them. But I've had pastors say, no, apologetics, looking into the arguments, that's going to cause even more doubt in some people to leave Christianity. And I think if Christians are honest with themselves, they'll say, yes, this has actually happened in the past. And a lot of people, when they start to really investigate what and why they believe, they end up leaving it.
And that's what we're doing. We're trying to give people reasons for the hope that we have. We're saying to be a Christian doesn't mean that you check your brain at the door when you come to church. No, being a Christian means that you put your mind to good use.
Yeah. Why is he saying this?
We're encouraged to worship God, love the Lord our God with all our heart, strength, soul, and our mind.
Why do you think he feels the need to emphasize that you don't check your brain at the door when you go to church? And this is similar to why I really gave, what's his name? Randall, oh my goodness. What's his last name? Rouser. Why I gave Randall Rouser the gears the other day. A lot of people thought I was way too mean on him. I was mean on him because he's a PhD university professor. I'm not going to make things easy for him. I purposely made things difficult for him. And but I don't want to get on that. But he brought up the same thing, that he asked me if I thought he was rational or reasonable. And it's this whole idea of I think Christians feel insecure because they've been beat up for the last decade or two, that they believe in fairy tales and they are irrational for what they believe. And so they feel it necessary to combat that and say, no, we're not crazy for believing these things. And I want to remind people like Justin Brierley and even Rand Rouser, if he's watching and listening, that the gospel is foolishness to those who are perishing. Your own scripture says that. The gospel is foolishness. So when you say you don't have to check your brains at the door, you have to remember, and I'm not talking about just atheists. I'm talking about all other worldviews, all other religions other than Christianity will, at least in some parts, view your religion, what you believe, Justin, as utter foolishness. And that we will think that on some things you have checked your brain at the door. It's similar to a flat earther saying, we believe the flat earth, we have all these great reasons and rationale for why we think the earth is flat. You don't have to check your brain at the door to be a flat earther. There's some great minds who believe the earth is flat and have done the science, and science is pointing in the direction of the flat earth. Don't you know?
We're not supposed to separate the two. And so that's what it's all about on the show. Having that mutual dialogue where we understand that we're not going to agree and there's going to be tough questions, and we're not claiming we have all the answers, but we are saying we think there's something about this Christian story that is extraordinary, that is compelling, and we want to let you know why we're Christians. So that's what I've been aiming to do over the last 12 or 13 years. And the show has really grown up in the shadow of a particularly aggressive kind of atheism that took root about 10 or 12 years ago. Sometimes it's called the new atheism. Don't know if anyone's heard of that term, the new atheism.
Is it really aggressive form of atheism, or is it just the fact that Christianity, let's say in the UK or in the United States, has had a pass for so many decades, so many centuries, that finally, when some people like Sam Harris or Richard Dawkins speak up, that it feels like an offense? Well, I guess Richard Dawkins, yeah. And in Hitchens, God delusion and all that sort of thing. But it's I think it's that whole sense of that privilege of that idea of Christianity has had this high standing in the West for so many decades and centuries that any pushback is like, oh, these guys are just they're anti-us, they're anti-theists, they're out to get us, and so forth.
But really, the figurehead at the front of that is a guy called Richard Dawkins. He's a biology professor in Oxford, and he wrote a book about 10 years ago called The God Delusion. And it was basically a book that said, religion, it's all just fairy tales. Anyone who believes in God is basically just delusional. And so that's been the sort of narrative that we've seen in our culture. In the West, many people buying into this view that God is just for people who've left their brain at the door. And so what we've been aiming to do on the show is to show a different story, a different kind of narrative, that actually you can be a Christian who uses your brain, who loves science, who loves history, who loves culture.
Yeah, how many flat earthers would say that they don't love science, they don't love culture? How many flat earthers would say, yes, we've checked our brains at the door? How many Mormons would say, yes, before we walk into a Mormon temple, we check our brains at the door? How many Muslims do you know that say, yeah, before we enter a mosque, we check our brains at the door? Every religion says that they're thinking and they're reasonable and all these things. But yet, Justin, I don't think you would say it's very rational to believe that people get their own planets after they die, like the Mormons believe, or that a beast flew to the moon, Muhammad flew on a winged beast to the moon, and so forth. Like, you would probably say, come on, guys, let's get serious. Like, wouldn't you have that compunction of saying something like that? Like, this is silliness. Come on, guys. Well, this is for people who are not Christian. They have that same attitude towards Christianity. Hey, thank you so much, CSB, for the donation. Your cat says hello to me. Titanicus, he likes your channel. Oh, thank you so much, CBS. I really appreciate the donation.
And you can believe that at the center of all of that
I didn't know
is a
cats
person
like
called
me.
Jesus Christ. And so it's with Richard Dawkins in mind, and the fact that he's, if you like, put the questions to us as Christians, that we've had to then step up and say, okay, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to answer this? What are we going to do for this next generation who are watching people like Richard Dawkins online? Where are the Christian thinkers who are going to step forward and give the account for God, make a defense of the faith?
It's okay. See, I realize you made a mistake and donated twice. I'll give you double the pleasure on this video.
That's sometimes what we think of when we talk about apologetics. It's a strange kind of word because it sounds like you're apologizing for something, but actually it comes from the Greek word apologia, which is to make a defense of a viewpoint. It's a legal term. And very often what we're doing when we're speaking to skeptics is we're making a defense of our faith. We're showing them why we believe what we believe. And
this is a pet peeve of mine, but when he's making a defense to skeptics, are Muslim skeptics, are Mormon skeptics, there's Mormons who are just as passionate as you are, Justin, who think you got a lot of things wrong about Christianity. A lot of things wrong. Joseph Smith said himself that your version of Christianity is wrong. Are they skeptics too? Or again, why are you focusing on guys like me?
over the years,
I'm flattered.
It struck me that sometimes many Christians feel like all of the onus is on them, that they have to bear the burden of all the proof and all the evidence. You know, the atheist may be over here saying, well, look, I don't believe in God, so could you show me some evidence, please? And maybe the Christian is here scratching their head and thinking, well, gee, that's going to be tough. But actually, I don't think it's like that. I think...
You don't think it's like that? Imagine in any other case, any other God other than yours. And I say, sorry, let's call, I don't even want to put a name on it. We'll call the God Titanicus. We're going to call the God Titanicus. Justin Brierley, I believe in the God Titanicus. Wouldn't you answer the same way and say, well, I need some evidence that Titanicus is real and is a real God? Well, why are you putting all this burden on me? Like, what's your worldview? Like, why don't you believe in Titanicus?
I think actually everyone has a point of view. Everyone has what you might call a worldview. Now, for the Christian over here, it's going to be that they believe there's a God who created the universe, who created them, a God who loves us and gives us purpose, a God who even came in person to be with us in Jesus Christ, to die for us and rose again to give us new life. That's the Christian story in a nutshell, and that's the way they see the world. That's their worldview. But the atheist, the person who doesn't believe in God, they've also got a worldview, okay? And it's a worldview that they need to defend and justify as well. Because many of the atheists I meet hold to something that's sometimes called naturalism or materialism. And it's the view that there is no God, and all that exists is energy and matter and the laws of nature.
Hey, thanks, Brian. Thanks, Ronald. Your dog wants to meet Titanicus. This is very bothersome to me because I call myself an atheist, and I know a lot of atheists, and we don't agree on many, many things. But what's different with Christianity is that according to the way I was raised and a lot of Christians I've talked to, there's a core proposition there, and that is that there is a God, and he came to earth and died and rose again. His name's Jesus. And there's certain rites and rituals like baptism and communion that I would say 90% of Christians adhere to. Try to find that in atheism. Like there's some atheists who believe in ghosts, and there's atheists who believe in some type of afterlife, and it runs the gamut. There's no book, there's no scroll for atheists. Like even naturalism. People say, Doug, are you a naturalist? And I say, I don't know. Does naturalist mean that I've closed my mind off to the idea of a God? And if they answer yes, then I'll say, no, then I'm not a naturalist. I'm totally open to the idea of a deity or gods or whatever if they reveal themselves in a reliable way to me sometime in the future. But I do think that the laws of nature seem to work pretty well. So if that's what you mean by a naturalist, then I am a naturalist.
That's all there is, ultimately. And anything else that we think about or see in life, well, it's really just an illusion. There is no purpose to life. The universe didn't come from anywhere, and it's not really going anywhere. All those things that we like to invest our lives in, beauty, truth, love, they're all ultimately reducible to atoms in motion. Now, that's an interesting worldview.
By the way, what he's doing now is what I think every Christian should do if you want to proselytize Christianity. I think this goes to the root of the needs of us Homo sapiens, of us humans. We have this need in us, even me. We have this need in us to want to feel special. We have this need in us to want to think that maybe there's a purpose outside our planet even, that there's a meaning for everything and a reason for why things happen. It sometimes is very painful to think that some bad things just happen and that's that, and there's nothing that can be done about it. In some cases, it's very deflating, right? And I think this strategy, and I've actually said this on prior videos, prior live streams, that if you want to be an effective apologist, do what Justin Brierley is doing right here. Really appeal to meaning, purpose, and hope. Because I think that really resonates where a lot of human beings are at.
But you need to defend it. If that's the way you think reality is, then I'm going to ask you a few hard questions about that. So you see, it's not that the Christian has to do all the defending and all the proving things. It's that we've both got a worldview. The atheist over here, they've got one way of seeing the world, and the Christian has another way of seeing the world.
Yeah, and 1,000 Christians will see the world 1,000 slightly different ways, and 1,000 atheists will see the world slightly 1,000 different ways.
And the question is, which one is true? And which one fits the evidence that we actually see? And in my experience, I've found that the Christian worldview wins out every time. I think it's the most compelling story we have for what we see around us.
And what would change your mind on that, Justin? That's the real key here. The key is having markers in your life to know when you're wrong about how you're seeing the world and what your conclusions are about it.
And what I want to do this morning is just to explain a few reasons, a few ways that you might begin a conversation with someone who's completely skeptical about faith, someone who just says, look, you've had a great experience, you've had some kind of spiritual feeling when you go to church, whatever. I've never experienced that. So can you show me something that I can look at? And that's where we can say, actually, there is something you can look at.
It's interesting to me that he said what he just said there, that some experience in church. Does he get that a lot from atheists, I wonder?
There's a few reasons why I think Christianity is the best explanation of the way we see the world. We're going to start that with a point.
Okay, this is really important. 3 reasons why I believe God... now, it's 3 reasons why I believe in Christianity. But now, he's going to talk about reasons why he believes in God, which is different than why he believes in Christianity. I know it might be a minor point, but I think it's a really important point, because he could be a Muslim right now with a couple of his points that he's about to bring up.
That says God makes sense of human existence. Being a human is pretty amazing, isn't it? I mean, when you look at ourselves, we are extraordinary. And if you look into the data and the medical stuff and the science, it's just extraordinary how complicated and extraordinary our bodies are, the way that we function. And one of the privileges...
Yeah. Actually, I'm not going to say.
I've had of hosting my show is having all kinds of people from both sides of the argument talk about the science behind biology, behind physics, behind the universe. And one of the most extraordinary things I learned is the way the universe is set up in the most extraordinary way.
The universe is set up in an extraordinary way? Now, this is getting interesting.
To produce you and me.
To produce us. The universe was set up in an extraordinary way to produce us. Well, let's very briefly think about how it was set up in an extraordinary way. It was set up in such a way that we had an expansion of our reality, some people call it the Big Bang, that happened 13.5 billion years ago. And then it took about 10 billion years? Yeah, 10 billion years to even form planets. And then it took... another 2 or 3 billion years to form single-celled life, and maybe just 500 million years ago we had some type of complex life. That's amazing setup to how we got to us today.
You see, a lot of atheists out there say, well, science just proves atheism. That's the usual mantra. Science is disproving God and proving atheism. But I think actually the trajectory has been in the opposite direction. And this isn't a story that's often being told, but I want to show you a little video. I've tried to condense.
Now remember, this is reasons why he's a Christian. This has nothing to do with Christianity. A God could exist, a creator God could exist, and Christianity is still false.
A big idea into a short video. It's something called a fine-tuning of the universe for life. So I'm going to let the video do the talking for a couple of minutes.
Some people say that human existence is a result of a roll of the cosmic dice. Like the gambler who stakes his life savings on the next throw, we just got lucky in the lottery of life. Some people say there's no purpose in the universe, no grand plan, no God behind it all. Our numbers just came up and here we are. But I don't believe them, and nor should you. If I roll this dice, the chances of getting a 6 is 1 in 6. That's not too bad. But what are the chances of me rolling 6 twice in a row? Well, the odds get longer. It's 1 in 6 times by 1 in 6. That's 1 in 36. So I'd have to be pretty lucky to get 2 6s in a row. Now, every time I add the chances of rolling another 6 in a row, the odds go up exponentially, and it gets even more unlikely. Now, what if I rolled this dice 70 times, and every single time I got a 6? Okay, that's pretty unlikely, but it's possible, right? Well, in fact, the chances of rolling a 6 70 times in a row are around 1 in 10 to the 55. That's a 1 with 55 zeros after it. Now, just to put that in perspective, how long would I have to stand here rolling this dice, allowing about 5 seconds per roll, before hitting that lucky streak and rolling 76s in a row? Well, I had a mathematician friend work it out for me. On average, you
A mathematician friend.
would have to continually roll this dice for 100 trillion, 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 trillion years before your numbers come up. That's a long time. What if you applied that thinking to us? What are the odds of us being here? Now, the odds of rolling 76s in a row, 1 in 10 to the 55, as it happens, those are the same odds of something called the expansion rate of the universe being just right for the existence of us here today. From the moment of the Big Bang, when our universe began to rapidly expand,
He's almost done. Don't worry, guys. He's almost done.
the rate of that expansion was exquisitely finely balanced. Any faster, and the universe would have expanded too rapidly to allow the formation of chemicals, atoms, stars, and galaxies. Any slower, and the universe would have collapsed back in on itself. But as it happens, the universe expanded at just the right rate to allow for life to develop in the future, for us to be here. It hit 70 rolls of the number 6 in a row, first time. And the expansion rate of the universe is just one among 30 or so other incredibly sensitively finely tuned constants and fundamental forces in the universe that must be just the way they are for the universe to be able to produce us. So let's imagine, if I went ahead and rolled this dice 70 times, and what do you know, every time it came up 6. No waiting for trillions upon trillions of years, first time. Beginner's luck? Hardly. You would assume that I must have rigged it. Maybe the dice are loaded, maybe there are 6s on every side. It can't be chance. Now let me ask you, why would we assume that this universe with us in it, which is actually way more improbable than my 70 rolls, is just a result of chance? The fact that we're here shows that someone's loaded the dice.
The fact that we're here shows that someone has loaded the dice.
In fact, maybe there's no dice at all. What if the evidence points to this life-permitting universe actually being the product of an intelligent mind which intended for us to be here?
Okay, I'll stop it here. What's interesting about this is, first of all, I think it's good to try to find some type of agreement here. And the agreement that I would have with Justin Briley here is that, hey, it is amazing that we're here, that we exist. And I think it's important to say something like, you know what? You could be right. Maybe a deity of some kind did create life like this, in this way. But it is strange that a deity would create life, have this whole thing start 13.5 billion years ago, and just 500 million years ago, after 13 billion years of nothingness, then life start to creep up. It is kind of curious why this deity would do it that way, and through the long and tedious way through of evolution via common descent. That's kind of weird. But yeah, you're right. A god could have done this. But another way to go about this, hey, thank you for the donation, Roger. The chances of the universe being exactly right for us is 100%. Yes, that's what I was going to get at. Let me bring up, I don't know if this would resonate with a Christian like Justin Brierley or not, but let me try it. So imagine you have a forest. And in this forest you have, I don't know, how many trees would be in a forest? Depends on how big the forest is, right? But let's say this is in a city, so I just pulled this picture up quickly. But imagine a forest where you have thousands and hundreds of thousands of trees. And of those hundreds of thousands of trees, how many branches do we have? We have hundreds of thousands of branches. And out of the hundreds of thousands of branches, How many twigs do we have? We have even more. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of twigs. And then what are the chances that a certain leaf falls from a certain twig, from a certain branch, from a certain tree within this forest? And not only that, that this certain leaf flies at a certain velocity in a certain distance from that tree and lands at precisely the right spot, at the right angle, facing the right direction, face up or face down, a little crumpled. What is the probability of all those things, that the leaf is in the right spot, the right place, turned the right direction, with the right crinkles, from the right, flown in the right direction, the right distance from the tree, from the right twig, from the right branch, from the right tree, even from the right forest? I bet you anything, if we were to crunch the numbers on that leaf, what the probabilities of having that happen, man, we would get some really big numbers. Just like Justin did here in this video. But another way to go about this is to ask the question, okay, the fine-tuning, what's the probabilities that all this just happened by chance? My question to the theist, to the Christian, would be, how does God change any of that? How does God make it more probable? Like, if you're a Christian listening right now, how would you answer that? Hey, thank you for the donation, Mainyard Saves. Born in an NAB family, I used to think, what's wrong with me? I never got it to begin with. Even though I thought I was doing it right, I never bought into it. Needless to say, I was the black sheep from the get-go. Hey, I understand what you're talking about. There's only 2 atheists in my family I had 50 first cousins, and so, yeah. But how would you answer, if you're a Christian listening, how would you answer the question, how does God change any of this fine-tuning, like the odds? How does God exactly put the odds in his favor? Now, if you're a Christian listening, I think the only thing you can say is, well, he just does. But I'm asking how? I'm asking, how does God do it? How does he create life from nothing? How does he cause the Big Bang to even happen in the first place? How did he work it out so just at the right time, 13 billion years ago, that singular-celled organisms started, or cells started, and then organisms started? How did he put his finger on mutations of genetics? How? How does the fact that there's a God change these odds? And I don't want to offend Christians or theists here, but I think the only thing you can say is, well, he just spoke it. He just said it, and it happened. And what you have to admit is you're just saying, he just went, oh, okay. He just went poof, and it happened. It sounds a little bit like magic, right? And I know that's offensive to use that word magic, but that's basically what you're saying, is the odds are so against that we're even here. God has to be involved. But how? Well, I don't know, he just did it. He's all powerful. He just thinks it and it happens. How? Well, he just does it. I don't know, Doug. These are silly questions you're asking.
Now, you could come up with some speculative other theory. Maybe there's an infinite number of universes, giving you an infinite number of chances to roll the dice. Maybe. But we don't have any scientific evidence for it.
We don't have any scientific evidence for, I think he's saying, for the multiverse. I'm not sure if that's true. We have some theories that have some scientific evidence to back it, but let's assume that he's right. Let's assume Justin's right.
So if you're hanging your hat on that possibility, then you're every bit as much committed to a faith position as the person who says God was behind it.
Now, I don't hang my hat on anything. This is what's different between me and that guy. That guy says, I can't explain how we're here. The odds are so against it. Must be a God. I don't say, must be a multiverse. It could be a multiverse, could be a God. But what's different between me and a guy like Justin Briley is, I have the guts, I have the backbone, I have the nerve to say, I don't know. I suggest you try it someday, Justin.
Believing in God isn't a delusion. It's a perfectly reasonable conclusion when we look at the fingerprints on our universe. And if it's true that we aren't just the fluke results of a cosmic roll of the dice, and that we're actually here because a grand designer intended us from the very beginning, well, that's worth staking something on.
A grand designer. It's interesting that he used that word, grand designer, because I really think guys like Justin Brierley, people who espouse the fine tuning, they almost have to, I think they have to reject a lot of stuff. They have to reject this concept of the Earth or the universe being 13.5 billion years old and the Earth being 4.5 billion or 4.6 billion years old, and that life, that Homo sapiens only have existed 200,000 years or so, and that we evolved from Neanderthals and other ancestors, the interbreeding and all this, and it took only 300 million years ago or something like that for single cell to go to multicellular. Like, seriously, Christians, if you believe any of that, if you accept the science, that's some grand design, isn't it? That your God chose that methodology, that way of creating us today. Or do you just reject all that, everything I just said? Maybe you do. But if you consider yourself, yes, science and Christianity, they're not at war with each other. Science and Christianity, they go together like this. And yes, so God, for some reason, thought he would just let there be hydrogen floating around for 13 billion years and then start the fusion process, 10 billion years later or something like that. It's like, wow, really, your God has quite the imagination.
That video has become quite popular. It's had over 1.5 million views on YouTube. And one person got in touch with me. There'd been someone who'd been struggling with their faith, but this video seemed to put a few things together for them. And they actually sent me a picture of their wrist, and they'd had a dice tattooed on their wrist to remind them that they're not here by chance.
Yeah, and what's interesting, again, the fine-tuning argument has nothing to do with Christianity. It's an argument for general deism or general theism.
It was amazing. There's been an extraordinary reaction, and for a lot of people, this is the way in. Science isn't something that disproves God. It's something that actually is a way in to seeing how crazily special we are in this universe. And it's not just this. I mean, I could go on about the way that biologically we have this extraordinary DNA within us that seems to speak of some kind of a creative force behind it. I could talk about the Big Bang, the fact that somehow time, space, energy, and matter all appeared suddenly 14 billion years ago. I mean, who set that off? There are all these ways.
Who set that off? Well, it had to be my God, the Christian God.
In which I think what we know about science isn't pointing away from God. It's pointing towards God. So I think when it comes to making sense of human existence...
Seriously, Justin, you seriously think that 14 billion years evolution via common descent, that points to a God? You seriously think 96% dark matter, small, tiny fraction of our universe, even close to being hospitable to life, you seriously think this points towards a deity? Now, maybe it does for you. I don't know, but your expectations of what you would expect if this God exists versus mine is really quite different. And I really think that if you just stop to think about it for a second, I don't know. It's if you didn't feel the need to feel so special, and I think this is the key thing. I think it's the need to feel that you have meaning, hope, purpose. If you could put that aside for a second and be like Spock, I think you would say, wait a minute, really? Why would a God set things up like this? The flat earthers actually have a better case than you, Justin, because if they're right, if the flat earth model of the universe is right, that basically the universe is just a planet Earth that's a disk with a dome, and that's it. And then all the planets and stars we see are just like little pricks on top of the dome. If that's true, I tell you, I think I have to become a theist. Maybe not a Christian, but I think I have to become a theist. Because that seems like, wow. That's something only a God could imagine.
God is the best explanation. And I don't think atheism has a great explanation for this, because if we're just here by chance, well, we already saw the odds are stacked massively against that. That doesn't make sense as an explanation of why we're here. So I think God is the best explanation of human existence. But now I want to go to my second piece of evidence for you. I think God makes sense of human value. And for this one, we're going to go from looking outside of ourselves at the universe to looking inside of ourselves. And I want to begin this by telling you a story. In 1973, a wealthy businessman, Jaime Jaramillo, was walking along the streets of Bogota in Colombia when he saw a young girl climbing through a manhole down into the sewers below. Well, Jaime was intrigued. He went home, he put on a wetsuit, and he followed that young girl into the sewers. And to his amazement, he discovered about 90 children living in these filthy, rat-infested sewers under the streets of Bogota. The reason they were there was that on the streets above, off-duty policemen were killing these children. They were shooting them. One officer said this. He said, "Killing these kids is like killing lice. We call them the disposable."
He's painting a picture of some major suffering, and this is evidence for God how?
Now, since then, James has gone on to rescue hundreds of these street kids, and he's put them in a loving Christian home. He's used his money to give them an education and a life there. And I'm sure, like me, you find that story both...
I wonder if he'd be willing to put them in a loving Hindu home?
Incredibly disturbing and inspiring. Disturbing that people could treat kids like that. Inspiring because of what James did. We react with horror at the idea that people could be treated as disposables. But then I think we have to ask ourselves the question, why? Why do we believe that human life should be valued? Why did James do the right thing? Now, the fact is, on atheism, I've struggled to find an answer to this question of why we value human life this way. Because if all that's going on in reality is matter in motion and a random force of evolution producing all the different life we have on Earth, then we're just one more randomly produced piece of life on Earth. There's nothing...
Okay, if Justin never watches this, or if you're a Christian like Justin, and you think, how on atheism can you have any value of life if we're just molecules in motion? My advice is to think about other animals. Think about chimpanzees, think about orangutans, think about gorillas, and just ask the same question. Like, why do gorillas value each other? Why do they protect each other? Why do dogs value their young? And why do dogs protect each other within a certain tribe? Like, there's packs of dogs, packs of wolves. If you can answer that question for other animals, I think you can answer it for humans. Now, but I completely understand that a lot of Christians don't want to go there. They don't want to admit that we humans are animals, because then the whole specialness goes away. If I'm just an animal, then I'm not special. But I want to be special, so don't call me an animal. But I think this does explain, I think evolution does explain that when you do take care of each other in your tribe and in your species, that lends to survivability.
Particularly special about us. Why should we intrinsically think that we're more valuable than the louse? If one culture develops a disregard for life, for human life, then that's just the way that culture is developed. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just the way the world is. There's nothing intrinsically special about us for any particular reason on an atheistic view of life.
But this is exactly how I think Christians should proselytize, the way Justin is doing right now. Because it's human nature, I think, to want to feel special, want to feel loved, because, again, it helps with survivability. And so you'll do things to help the community. If people say, "Oh, look at this person, they've done something great for the community," you get adulation or whatever, and it helps survivability.
But we don't feel that way, do we? That doesn't feel right. In our bones, we feel no. That's not the right story. I had a really interesting conversation with the person I mentioned earlier, Richard Dawkins. He was having a debate at Oxford University with John Lennox, who will be joining me at Unbelievable Live in LA. And they had a fascinating conversation, the Christian and the atheist, debating God, science, and faith. And at the after-show party, I managed to get hold of my very first interview with Richard Dawkins, probably the most famous atheist on the planet. And I managed to get my 10 minutes with him, and we had a conversation about human value. And I want to just read you exactly how part of our conversation went. I said to him, "But if we'd evolved into a society where rape was considered fine, would that mean that rape is fine?" And he said, "I don't want to answer that question. It's enough for me to say that we live in a society where it's not considered fine. We live in a society where selfishness, failure to pay your debts, failure to reciprocate favors is regarded askance. That's a value judgment, but I'm glad that I live in such a society." And I responded, but when you make a value judgment, don't you yourself immediately step outside of this evolutionary process and say that the reason this is good is that it's good? And you don't really have any way to stand on that statement.
Yeah, brother. This is almost like a presuppositional type argument that Justin Briley is bringing up now, that if you don't have a basis, if you don't have something outside of planet Earth to say something's good or to say something's bad, then you can't really say it's good, or you can't really say it's bad. I feel like judging Justin Briley right now as being insecure. It's an insecurity that you need this certainty in your life in order to survive. You need this certainty in your life to say, if I don't know what's really, really wrong or really, really right or really, really good or really, really bad, if I can't say it's really, really bad, what am I going to do with myself? I'm going to go nuts. I'm going to go crazy. I have to have this firm foundation, otherwise. But here's the problem. Even in their worldview, in the Christian or Judeo-Christian worldview, things like rape, it's not clear cut. If you look at, in fact, here's a challenge for Christians if you're watching. Find me one verse in the Old Testament where a woman got to choose to get married or not. There's some Christian women. There's going to be at least 10 Christian women watching this. And they're going to go, well, of course I can. There's Ruth. No, it wasn't Ruth. There's Rebecca. No, it wasn't Rebecca. Find me in the Old Testament where a woman had the choice on whom she married. Marriage in the Old Testament was a transaction between two men. The woman had no say. Now, is that rape? If the woman didn't want to do it and the father said, you got to, you have to. Now, the scary thing is, I understand why Richard Dawkins wouldn't want to answer the rape question, because, it can be taken out of context and it makes him look like a real, schmuck and so forth. But think back 200, 300,000 years ago. You really think that our ancestors, they asked permission to have sex? You think so? Go to the zoo. Do you think orangutans, chimpanzees, gorillas, do you think they actually have a system of communication where they ask consent? Maybe they do. I don't know. But I don't think so.
And he replied, well, my value judgment itself could come from my evolutionary past. And I said, well, therefore, it's just as random in a sense as any product of evolution. And he said, you could say that, but in any case, nothing about it makes it more probable that there's anything supernatural. And I finished by saying, okay, but ultimately, your belief that rape is wrong is as arbitrary as the fact we've developed 5 fingers rather than 6. And he said, you could say that, yes. And you could say that. And actually, I think if you're a thoroughgoing...
What's interesting is that, according to many Christians, I know it's really hard for Christians to wrap their brain around this, but if Yahweh commanded rape, that would be good by definition, right? That would not be wrong anymore. A specific action is only wrong if God says it's wrong. If God says it's right, then it's right. Now, if you're a Christian who says, well, God would never command rape, he would never do that, Doug. How dare you say that? Do you know the mind of God? How dare the pot look to the potter, the clay look to the potter and say, I know what you would do and what you wouldn't. He might have morally sufficient reasons to command rape. So how dare you say that?
Atheist, you should say that. But why do we feel that's so wrong? Why do we know that there's a reason we shouldn't treat people that way? Why do we feel somehow in our bones, recoil at the idea that our moral belief that rape is wrong, is that just a happenstance of the hand that evolution happens to have dealt us? No, we know that it's not the story. We know there's something about...
See, and I would say, Justin, that we, Homo sapiens, as animals, our morality has evolved just like our bodies have. The way we view things has changed over time. And what causes the greatest survivability, if you have a society where you're constantly living in fear, whether it's rape or someone stealing your organs or whatever, that society is not going to flourish. And so our morality has evolved.
about being human that means that you have to treat someone a certain way, don't we? What explains that feeling? What explains that idea that we have this inherent dignity and value? Where
What explains? What explains? If I don't have an explanation, it must be God.
does that come from? Again, Christianity has a ready answer. You have inherent
Christianity has an answer. I love answers. So whether it almost sounds like whether it's right or wrong, this answer resonates with me, so I'm going to grab it and cling on to it.
dignity and value because you are made in the image of God. And that gives you inestimable value. In fact, God values you so much he came in person to die for you.
Okay, did you hear what he just said? And by the way, this is why guys like, what's his name? Marty Sampson. This is why guys like Marty Sampson are doubting Christianity and leaving Christianity.
Image of God. And that gives you inestimable value. He has a ready answer. You have inherent dignity and value because you are made in the image of God.
You have inherent dignity and value because you're made in the image of God.
And that gives you inestimable value.
That gives you inestimable value. Tell that to the Canaanites. Tell that to the Amalekites. Tell that to any person who God commanded die. Tell that to the people in the days of Noah. Do they have value? Weren't they evil? Didn't God feel the need to wipe certain people out because of what they did? Did they have value, those people? Or do the people who only follow Yahweh have value? See, this is a huge problem for Christians because on one hand they say, yes, the value we get is from the value given by us because we're created in the image of God. But yet, yeah, some people deserve to die. Some people need to be wiped off the planet. Even if they're babies, even if they're toddlers. To quote Jonathan Pritchard on the Braxton Hunter channel, yeah, Jesus drowned babies, get over it.
In fact, God values you so much he came in person to die for you. I mean, you cannot get a statement of greater value of what a human life is worth than that. So it doesn't matter if you're a billionaire living in a penthouse or you're a street kid in the streets of Bogota, you have value. And nothing else can change that. That's the Christian story. That's why I believe we have this sense that we have human...
You have value, but you might... here's another thing. If you're a Calvinist, if you're a Christian Calvinist, no matter if you're a billionaire or if you're a street kid living in Calcutta, you have value, but your value might be for destruction, for God to foreordain you to spend eternity in a place called hell.
value, it's because we're made in the image of God. And I don't believe that atheists have an adequate answer for that. It's very hard to justify, if you're an atheist, why we believe in this idea of human dignity and human value.
Wait a minute. I'm starting to get... this is starting to get fun. Okay, let's assume you're right, Justin, that atheists don't have an adequate answer to human value. Question, do Hindus have an adequate answer for human value? This is, I think, the way to go with guys like Justin Barley or Christians who talk like this. Just ask them point blank, do you believe that Hindus have a good explanation or a explanation for things like human dignity and human value? If they say no, then say, okay, so then you're not just against atheists here, you're against atheists and Hindus. Yeah, I'm against atheists and Hindus. Okay, so it's not an atheist-theist thing. It's basically a Christianity versus everybody else thing. No, the Jews, they have it right too. Well, what do you mean, Jews? They have the right basis. What about Muslims? Do they have a proper basis? Well, no, not the Muslims, just the Jews. Well, why not the Muslims? They believe Allah is basically the same Abrahamic God as the Jews. I tell you, once you pressure Christians on this whole idea of having a basis for morality, a basis for meaning and purpose and all this sort of thing, and you get it off atheism and you force them to make judgment calls on religions other than their own, they get really uncomfortable with that. Because what ends up happening is some of them will want to admit that it's only atheism that can't have a standard outside this planet, outside themselves, because they don't believe in a God. But Hindus do. They believe in many gods. And some even believe in personal gods, some Hindus, and Muslims and Jews definitely do. So, but ultimately, Christians think that the Jews and the Muslims and the Hindus believe in false things. So now they have a problem on their hand. They have a basis for morality and meaning, hope, and purpose, but it's based on something false. And that's a real problem for them, because if it's possible for them to have meaning, hope, and purpose and morality based on something false, then maybe atheists can have that as well, based on nothing. It's not even false. It's based on evolution.
God makes sense of human value. Third piece of evidence that I'm going to bring this morning. I believe that God makes sense of human purpose.
Okay, remember, the title of this is Why I'm Still a Christian After 10 Years. God makes sense of human existence was number 1. God makes sense of human value was number 2. And number 3 is God makes sense of human purpose. None of this has to do with Christianity.
To introduce you to a lady called Jennifer Fulwiler. She grew up in a loving family, but one in which religion was painted as clearly false. Jennifer says that she never remembers a time in her life growing up when she believed in God. She was raised on a diet of science, reason, and evidence-based thinking. Her bedtime reading was Carl Sagan's book Cosmos, believe it or not. And from a young age, she said she just assumed that the world ran according to a well-established set of natural laws, atoms, electrons, no need for God to explain anything in life. And she remained a happy atheist into the early years of her marriage. However, shortly after the birth of her first child...
I should have stopped it. I haven't heard this. I should have stopped it, but when he said in the early years of her marriage, as soon as he said that, I'm thinking to myself, she changed her mind when she had a baby. And then sure enough, he said that. It would have been such a good prediction to make.
Jennifer had a very big, dramatic shift in her thinking. She describes it this way in her own words. She says, I looked down and thought, what is this baby? And I thought, well, from a purely atheist, materialist perspective, he's a randomly evolved collection of chemical reactions. And I realized, well, if that's true, then all the love that I feel for him is nothing more than chemical reactions in my brain. And I looked down at him and I thought, that's not true. That's not the truth. And that moment was a turning point for Jennifer, and it led her on a journey that ultimately ended in Jesus Christ.
What's not the truth? That love is not based on chemicals in the brain?
And I think what Jennifer realized at that moment is that atheism tells a very different story about purpose and meaning.
You know what? I think what I'm about to say is true. I think you can have a mother holding her beautiful baby and have the utmost love for that baby. I could be wrong about this. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. But I think it's possible for a brain surgeon to go in to that mother's brain and cause that, or make at least the probabilities higher, that that mother will hate that baby and maybe even kill it. I think that's possible. Now, what does that do to this whole idea of love, Justin Brierley? If what I said is true, that a human being can cause a mother to hate her child by just doing things to her brain, do you still think love is something other than chemical?
To the one that Christianity tells. Again, Richard Dawkins, who I've referenced a few times this morning, has summarized it very neatly. He wrote this: the universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. And he's absolutely right. If there's no God, that is the universe we should expect to see. You know, if there's...
Yeah, the universe doesn't care about us. There's a good chance that sometime in the future, a really big rock is going to fly onto this planet, and that's going to be it. That's it. Oh, this is depressing, right? This is why Christianity exists. This is why religion exists, because of thoughts like this. It's like, I got to believe that there's a creator out there who has the earth in the palm of his hand, is going to protect us from stuff like that. But in reality, we have so much evidence that our universe is chaotic, and it doesn't care about us. It's out to kill us. and so, but it's this desire for for feeling special and for having hope and for having the security. And I think this is why religion exists.
There's no God. If atheism is true, then all of our human endeavors, all of our self-made human purposes, they're one day going to be gone and forgotten in a trillion or so years, when all that's left is, a vast cosmic expanse of nothing, because that's the story, actually. If the universe just peters out, that's what will happen to everything. There's no purpose, there's no meaning. But I see a very different universe to Richard Dawkins. I don't know about you, but when I look around, I don't just see physical processes and natural laws. I see love. I see truth. I see beauty. I see hope. I see good and I see evil. I see a universe that is teeming with purpose and meaning. And I don't think
I see all those things too, Justin.
atheism can account for that.
And you think atheism can't account for it, and I think atheism can account for that. But I think the words like love and hope and meaning and purpose and truth, I think, Justin, you and many Christians have defined those words in such a way that you have smuggled in the word God into those definitions, that if God doesn't exist, you would say, oh, no, then those things don't exist either. And that's the key problem. That's the key difference between guys like you, Justin, and guys like me. In fact, if you were to say love by definition has to involve a deity, or truth by definition has to involve a deity, and if I don't believe in any deities, then I would say, okay, yeah, then I don't believe in love. I don't believe in truth, because you've defined it in such a way that you've taken those words off the table for me.
You see, we all experience this deep down longing for something more, don't we? Sometimes called the argument from transcendence. There's a great quote by C.S. Lewis, who's one of my favorite Christian thinkers, and he says this: a baby feels hunger. Well, there is such a thing as food. A duckling wants to swim. Well, there is such a thing as water. People feel sexual desire. Well, there is such a thing as sex. If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world.
Most probable explanation, or maybe we evolved in that way to help us survive.
Could that desire that spans all times, places, and cultures, that desire for something more, for meaning, for purpose, could it be that it has a real object which satisfies it?
How do you tell the difference? This is great. This is great. How do you tell the difference between a real object, which is the basis for meaning, hope, and purpose, and morality, versus a fake object? So in other words, let's pretend for a second that Christianity is false. Okay? This is just pretend. So if you're a Christian watching, you're safe. Everything's fine. We're just pretending. This imagination world. Christianity is false. In fact, Yahweh is not real. I'm not saying that there isn't any other gods, but all that's false. The Bible's false, just made up book. Christianity's false, Judaism's false, all false. But you still believe it's true, Justin. Man, you believe it's true. In fact, everything in your bones says it's true. Guess what, Justin? You're going to have a sense of meaning in your life because you believe it's true. You're going to have a sense of purpose in your life, Justin, because you believe it's true. You're going to say you have a basis for morality because you believe it's true, when in fact, all of it's false. But you think it's true. You see how that works, Justin? The feeling of believing something false is the same as the feeling of believing something true. It can still give you that meaning, hope, and purpose. This is why earlier I asked about, can a Hindu have a basis for morality, hope, meaning, and purpose? Because you clearly believe the Hindu, most of their beliefs are false, right? But yet they still have meaning. Everything inside them emotes, feels, thinks that this is true, and gives them this and gives them that, and is the basis for this, the basis for that, just like you do. So you could be taking the biggest placebo in the world right now, Justin. It could all be false, but yet you would still have this meaning, hope, and purpose because of it.
I love the fact that when we sang that song 100 billion times, it talked about the glory of the universe and this God who created 100 billion stars and galaxies, and they're all singing his praise, and we're just joining in the praise of the whole universe. That's a story that's worth living for. That's a story I want to be part of. That's a story with purpose and meaning and hope in it. And the reason it is because at the center of it, there's a person called Jesus Christ. You see, one thing we know about the human condition is there are two things we can't live without: love and hope. If you starve someone of love, if you take away hope, that person doesn't have a reason to live anymore. And when Jesus Christ came, he gave us those with both hands outstretched because...
Okay, now after, 20 minutes? He's finally trying to tie this in to Jesus.
On the cross, he showed the most supreme, sacrificial act of love we could ever hope to witness. And when he rose again from death, he gave us the most significant sense of hope we could possibly hope for. Hope for another world. Hope not just that the grave is
Human sacrifice gives us hope? How?
the end, but that there's a real meaning to our life. That whether you were born on the streets of Bogota or whether you're living in the penthouse, your life means something. There is purpose. That sense inside you that there's something about you that matters. There's a great...
Special. You are special.
big yes on that in Jesus' resurrection. You see, I meet many atheists, and I love...
He never said it here, but for some reason, I'm not sure why Christians are so scared to talk about heaven and hell, but that whole picture of Jesus dying and rising again, the purpose of that whole thing is for eternal life. That's the real purpose. Life is just a vapor here on the planet, according to Christianity. It says that that it even uses the word, just a vapor, the phrase, just a vapor. So the real issue here, what really gives meaning, what really gives hope, what really gives purpose is nothing here on earth. Sure, well, I shouldn't say nothing, but that's just the hors d'oeuvres. That's just the appetizers. That's just the appetite. What's really at stake here is eternal life, heaven and hell.
them. When I have atheists on my show, I get on so well with them. They're good people. The average atheist is not some kind of hard-bitten, angry, anti-God person. Actually, they're people kind of like you and me. And when I criticize...
Atheists are kind of like people like you and me, kind of.
...the atheist worldview, I'm not dismissing their honest search for truth. And I wouldn't want you to go away from here thinking that we should somehow, just get into an argument with an atheist and show them that they're wrong. They're on a journey for truth as well. We're all on that journey. But we do have some significant differences in how we view our story. You see, I find it very hard to believe that the rational and ordered universe we live in came from nowhere.
Rational and ordered universe? You really believe we live in a rational and ordered universe that's mostly dead space?
It's heading nowhere.
Atoms colliding.
I find it impossible
chaos.
to conceive that our intrinsic beliefs about human value and dignity are in the end just an illusion. And I can't...
It's not an illusion. It's things like value and dignity is what we place on each other.
I can't convince myself
You don't need a deity to do that.
that this search for purpose and meaning that we witness in all times and places is ultimately in vain. To me, it makes far more sense to read
It makes far more sense, just like it makes more sense for the Hindu to believe in the gods they believe in.
God's fingerprints and purposes, both out there in the universe we find ourselves in, and within here, in our deepest longings and purposes. That's why I'm a Christian. At the 10-year mark of doing my show...
That's why you're a Christian. You're a Christian because God makes sense of human existence, God makes sense of human value, and God makes sense of human... What was the last one? I forget. None of which... You could be a Muslim, you could be a Hindu, and still get all those things. You still haven't explained why you're a Christian. Why aren't you a deist? You could still have all these things through deism. Why aren't you a Muslim? Why aren't you a Hindu? Now, he probably has answers to all these things. He would probably go into the minimal facts or mere Christianity or something like that. But isn't it more reasonable that you're a Christian probably because of the culture you were raised in? Now, I'm not talking about whether or not Christianity is true or false. Don't throw the genetic fallacy at me. I'm just saying, if we were trying to place a bet on, you got little baby Justin Brierley, just born, and born in some place in the UK. We were place your bets. Is Justin going to believe in Jesus or not when he's 40 years old? I don't know how old he looks like he'd be close to 40. I think the odds would be in your favor that Justin would be a Christian someday.
Having listened to all of these arguments and objections to faith from atheists, I did a special show where I said, ask me anything to the audience. And the most common question that came in from both Christians and non-Christians listening was this. They said, Justin, how come, after hearing all those objections to faith, how come you're still a Christian? And to answer that question, I actually wrote a book. It's called Unbelievable.
Marketing.
Why, after 10 years of talking with atheists, I'm still a Christian. And I present some of these ideas and show that actually, when it comes to deciding between atheism and Christianity, I think think we've got an amazing story, an amazing way of looking at the world.
Every religion thinks they have an amazing story, Justin. Mormons, they have a pretty amazing story. Hindus have amazing stories.
It's something we can be thankful for. That faith is not something that's simply blind, where you're delusional if you believe in God. No, it's based on evidence. It's based on the way we see.
Is it based on scientific evidence? Is Christianity based on scientific evidence, Justin Brierley? I wonder if he would admit that the answer is no. I think even earlier in this same video, he admitted, no, maybe not. But a lot of Christians I've talked to, they're willing to admit, no, we're talking about God here. You can't subject God to scientific, empirical evidence. That's crazy.
The universe out there and the way we experience life in here. And I hope that when you go and have that conversation, the one that you're probably dreading, with that friend or neighbor or family member who doesn't believe, that you'll go out with a little bit more confidence to start a conversation and to listen and to respond and to say, well, here's something that might help you see things a different way.
Heath Farley says, I've had so many laughs since I found your channel. Well, I'm glad I could make you laugh, Heath.
It's been so good sharing the morning with you. Thank you very much, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Okay, that's then. So why after 10 years am I still an atheist? It's actually hasn't been quite 10 years. I think I'm close to now, boy, time flies. I think I'm close to 8 years now that I've been calling myself an atheist. And when I call myself an atheist, I mean I don't believe in any gods. That's why I call myself an atheist. I also call myself agnostic because I'm open to belief revision. I say I don't know. There could be a God out there. I'm not omniscient. So why is it after 10 years of living with a Christian woman, my wife of 26 years, why is it after 26 years of being married to her, why is it after my whole life being in a Christian culture, environment, my whole family is Christian except for my one cousin, why is it after 3 years of doing this YouTube channel and basically I don't watch hardly any atheist content? I just watch Christian content and some Muslim content and some Mormon content. Why is it after watching all these videos and interviewing and talking to Christians and theists in general, why is it I'm still an atheist? Now, some Christians out there would say, well, because you haven't been regenerated by the Holy Spirit, Doug. That's why you're not a Christian. God has to touch your life. Or some Christians out there saying, well, Doug, you're still an atheist after 10 years because you just want to live in your sin. That's why. You just hate God. Now, keep in mind that if you're a Christian and you say all these things to a guy like me, why can't I say it to guys like Justin Brierley? Well, the reason why after 10 years, Justin Brierley is still a Christian after all these interviews and stuff, is because he just loves Jesus. He loves Jesus so much that he's blinded to the evidence. He's the reason why Justin, you want to know the real reason? By the way, I'm kind of role-playing right now, so take this with a grain of salt if you're a Christian listening. Give me a little bit of grace here. But why can't I say, if you say to me, you just want to live in your sin, that's why you're an atheist, why can't I say to a guy like Justin, you're just scared you're going to get divorced if you leave Christianity? I think he's married. Yeah, I see a ring. That's the reason why you haven't left Christianity. Because your wife will cry for 10 years. My wife cried when I left. My wife cried a lot. And you're scared, Justin, that if you left Christianity, your wife was going to cry. And you don't want to hurt her. I understand that. And your income, Justin, your income is mostly from Christianity, right? Can you even do anything else? I can. Whether I'm an atheist or a Christian, doesn't matter. I can still make money. How about you, Justin? Well, maybe he'd say if he became an atheist, he would go on tour and make money that way. But I don't think there's much money in atheism unless you're writing top-selling books like Dawkins or Hitchens. You see the problem with saying stuff like, okay, this is the reason why Doug's still an atheist is because of all these things in his life. Like he wants to sin and he just hates God or he hasn't been regenerate. I can just come back and say similar things to guys like Justin Brierley. But here's the thing. And this is where I think I'm different than guys like Justin Brierley. I have more reasons to become a Christian than Justin has to become an atheist. Justin lives in a Christian culture. I know he's in the UK, but it's still Christian culture. I live in a Christian culture in the US. I have a Christian wife. He has a Christian wife. My life would be better if I could become a Christian. I think Justin's life, at least in the short term, would be worse. It would be harder. I wouldn't say worse. It would be harder if he left Christianity and became an atheist. Now, we both look at the evidence. Justin has looked at the evidence. I have looked at the evidence. Given those biases that we both have, I'm biased towards Christianity. My life would be easier if I could force myself to believe this stuff. And his life would be harder if he left it. Wouldn't that tilt the bias scale, or the objective scale? Aren't I a little more objective than you, Justin, when I'm looking at the evidence? Because I have all these reasons to believe it, and you have all these reasons to, like your income and your wife and so forth, to stay in the fold. I really do think I got a little bit on you there. And maybe the difference between you and me, Justin, is this whole video, you've been talking about this need to be special. Maybe it's our personality types. Maybe the fact that I don't have that need emotionally or psychologically to feel as loved, trust me, I like to be loved and I like to feel special, but maybe I don't feel that as much as you do. Maybe you really need to feel that way. And that's why you're still a Christian. If PineCreek reconverts, think of the money that will roll in. Yeah. Doesn't that make me moral that I haven't converted? I don't know. It's like, look at that face. Not mine. Look at his. It's like, that's a Christian face. I got an atheist face. PineCreek already sounds like a church, yes. Come to the church of PineCreek. Because if loving the Lord is wrong, I don't want to be right. What about James from MDD? What about James? I missed something. Like the fine-tuning argument, Christians, do you really believe in Jesus because of that? Or is this just a way to help you not feel stupid? CSB, you're giving me more money. Remember the lesson of the stream. Titanic's is God. Yes, that's the moral of the story. PineCreek Community Church of Atheism. Christian or not, from photos, I think I'd do well. My apologies to Justin Brierley. He was scheduled to come on the program, but we ran out of time. Have a good night, guys.